"You don't belong here, old man. This is a private event. Security, please escort my father-in-law out before he embarrasses anyone else." He said it loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. 40, maybe 50 people turned to look at me. Doctors in tuxedos, hospital executives in tailored suits, board members holding champagne flutes. My son-in-law, Dr. Marcus Hale, stood at the center of that room like he owned it. Maybe he thought he did. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at him the way I used to look at men who underestimated the weight of a timber contract. "My name is Walter Briggs. I am 63 years old. I drive a 12-year-old Ford pickup. I wear flannel shirts and work boots, even in October. I retired 2 years ago from the lumber business I built over 35 years in northern Maine, and I prefer strong coffee over any cocktail I have ever been offered." That night, standing in the lobby of Hargrove Memorial Hospital's annual fundraising gala, I looked exactly like what Marcus had always called me, a man who wandered in from the wrong world. What Marcus did not know, what he had never bothered to find out, was that I had donated $300,000 to that hospital the previous spring, anonymously, and that the chairman of the board, a man named Gerald Whitfield, had personally called me 4 days earlier to ask if I would attend the gala as his guest. But I am getting ahead of myself. My daughter, Claire, met Marcus Hale 8 years ago at a conference in Boston. He was a cardiologist completing his fellowship. She was a nurse practitioner. When she brought him home for the first time, I shook his hand, looked him in the eye, and told him I was glad to meet him. He smiled at me the way some men smile at furniture, politely, briefly, and without genuine interest. I told myself it was nerves. Some men are uncomfortable meeting a woman's father. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Over the following years, I gave Marcus Hale many benefits of many doubts. He corrected Claire at dinner. Gently at first, then not so gently. If she mentioned a medication or a procedure, he would sigh in a particular way and say, "That's not quite right, sweetheart," even when she was right. I watched my daughter, a woman who had graduated top of her nursing program, who could read an EKG and start an IV in the dark, slowly stop offering opinions at the table. He made comments about my work, nothing sharp enough to call out directly, just a kind of amused bewilderment, as if the lumber industry were a quaint hobby rather than a business that had employed 64 people and put 2 children through college. "So you just sell wood?" he said once, at Thanksgiving. The table laughed because they thought he was joking. He was not joking. But I stayed quiet. Claire loved him. They had 2 children together, my granddaughters, Lily and Rose, 7 and 5 years old. I was not going to be the man who poisoned a marriage with his own pride. Then last September, I drove down from Bangor to visit Claire and the girls while Marcus was at a medical conference in Chicago. What I found at that house told me everything I had been refusing to see. Lily opened the door wearing shoes with a crack along the left sole, held together with a strip of electrical tape. Rose was in a sweater 2 sizes too small, the sleeves stopping above her wrists. Claire met me in the entryway looking thin in a way that had nothing to do with health. Thin the way people look when they are quietly stretched past their limit. "Dad," she said, hugging me. "I didn't know you were coming. I had called twice that morning." She hadn't answered. I stayed for dinner. I watched my daughter stretch a pound of ground beef across a meal for 3 people and not take a full portion for herself. I watched Lily help Rose with her homework on a kitchen table where 2 of the chairs were held up by stacks of old magazines because the legs had broken and not been fixed. I did not ask questions that night. I hugged my granddaughters, read them a story, and waited until they were asleep. Then I sat across from Claire at that table, and I asked her to tell me the truth. She cried for a long time before any words came out. Marcus had a problem with money. Not a shortage of it. He earned over $400,000 a year as an attending cardiologist at Hargrove Memorial. The problem was where it went. A boat he kept at a marina in Portsmouth, season tickets to the Patriots, the Celtics, and the Red Sox. Memberships at 2 private clubs. A wardrobe built almost entirely from a single luxury brand whose name I could not have pronounced. And, as Claire told me in a voice barely above a whisper, a woman named Danielle. a pharmaceutical sales representative he had been seeing for at least 18 months, whose rent he had been paying in an apartment on the other side of the city. The household account got what was left, which was sometimes enough and sometimes not. Claire had tried to go back to work full-time. Marcus had told her it looked bad, a cardiologist's wife working night shifts. He had told her it made him look like he couldn't provide. He had told her a lot of things over a lot of years, and she had believed most of them because she loved him and because, as she admitted to me that night, she had slowly stopped trusting her own judgment. I drove home to Bangor in the dark. I did not turn on the radio. I needed to think clearly, and I have always thought best in silence. I want to be honest about what I felt that night. There was anger. Yes, the kind that sits low and hot in your chest, and does not flare up dramatically, because it has too much fuel to need to. But mostly what I felt was sorrow. Sorrow for my daughter, who had spent 8 years becoming smaller. Sorrow for Lily and Rose, who were wearing taped shoes and 2 small sweaters in a household with a $400,000 income. And beneath all of it, the quiet, steady knowledge that I was going to do something about this. I just needed to do it correctly. I did not act immediately. That is an important thing to understand about what came next. I spent 2 weeks doing nothing but thinking and making one phone call. The phone call was to a man named Ray Kowalski, who had done investigative work for my business over the years, background checks on partners, due diligence on acquisitions. He was thorough, discreet, and charged a fair rate. I told him what I needed. He told me it would take 3 to 4 weeks. It took 22 days. What Ray delivered was a document of 41 pages. Bank records, credit card statements, lease agreements, photographs, hotel receipts. 2 years of a life Marcus Hale had been living in parallel to the one my daughter believed she was part of. I read the document twice in one sitting. Then I put it in a locked drawer in my office, and I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be and how I used it. I could have taken it to Claire immediately. Part of me wanted to, but Claire was already fragile, and presenting her with 41 pages of her husband's betrayal without any preparation, without any structure around what came next, felt like handing someone a diagnosis without a treatment plan. I had seen men do that kind of thing and call it honesty. It was not honesty. It was the satisfaction of delivering a wound dressed up as kindness. So, I called my personal attorney first, a woman named Patricia O'Malley, who had handled my business affairs for 15 years and who had, in my experience, the sharpest mind and the most unshakable calm of anyone I had ever paid for professional services. I told her the situation. She listened without interrupting. Then she told me exactly what steps to take, in what order, and what to preserve and document at each stage. We spent 2 weeks preparing. I also, during that time, made a decision about the hospital gala. I had received Gerald Whitfield's invitation a week before my visit to Claire's house. Gerald and I had known each other for several years, not socially, but through a regional economic development board we both served on. When the hospital had launched a new cardiac wing expansion the previous year, Gerald had reached out to ask if I would consider a contribution. I had written a check for $300,000. It was a cause I believed in. My wife, Mary, had died of a cardiac event 11 years ago, and supporting cardiac care felt like a way to do something with grief that money alone cannot resolve. Gerald had honored my request for anonymity. As far as anyone at Hargrove Memorial knew, the gift had come from an unnamed regional donor, including, apparently, Marcus Hale, who worked in that very cardiac wing. When Gerald called to invite me to the gala, he mentioned that it would be a wonderful opportunity to, formally, if still quietly, acknowledge my generosity. I had been planning to decline politely. After my visit to Claire's house, I changed my mind. I did not tell Claire I was attending. I did not want her to be there for what was going to happen. I did not know exactly what that was. I had not planned the specifics. But I knew Marcus would be there, and I knew who I was, even if he had never found out. I arrived at the gala, wearing what I always wear to events that require my presence but not my performance, Dark trousers, a good blazer, my everyday boots. I was shown to a table near the front by a young woman with a clipboard who checked my name twice and smiled warmly. Gerald Whitfield had seen me come in from across the room and raised his hand in greeting. I nodded back. I had been seated perhaps 10 minutes when Marcus appeared. He was wearing a tuxedo. His hair was perfect. He was holding a glass of white wine and speaking to a group of colleagues when his eyes found me across the room. I watched the sequence of expressions move across his face. Confusion, then recognition, then something that sharpened into something I can only describe as territorial. He crossed the room toward me. His colleagues followed, curious. Walter. He did not call me Dad. He had never called me Dad. What are you doing here? This is a ticketed event. I was invited, I said. He glanced at his colleagues. A small smile. Invited by whom? By Gerald Whitfield. That landed somewhere. I could see it. But Marcus was a man who had built his whole professional life on the appearance of confidence, and so he recovered quickly. And what came out of that recovery was worse than what he would have said if he had taken a moment to think. Gerald Whitfield is the chairman of the board, he said, loudly enough for the people nearest us to hear. I seriously doubt he personally invited. He paused, looking me over. The boots. The off-the-rack blazer. I'm going to need to see your ticket, Walter. You don't belong here, old man. This is a private event. Security. Please escort my father-in-law out before he embarrasses anyone else. The room went quiet in that particular way. Rooms go quiet when something has happened that no one was prepared for. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the envelope Gerald had sent me. Inside was a card with the hospital's letterhead, handwritten, with Gerald's signature. I held it out to the nearest security guard, who read it, looked at me, and took a small step back. Mr. Briggs, the guard said carefully. Can I get you anything? Another drink? Marcus stared at the card. I did not say anything. I did not need to. Because at that moment, I heard Gerald Whitfield's voice behind me. Walter. He was a tall man, 68 years old, with the kind of bearing that fills a room without requiring volume. He shook my hand warmly with both of his. I'm so glad you came. I was just telling the board about our anonymous regional donor, though I suppose you're not quite so anonymous anymore. He smiled. Then he looked at Marcus. His expression did not change in any dramatic way. It simply became very precise. I see you've met Dr. Hale. He works in the cardiac wing. Your contribution helped build. The silence in that section of the ballroom was complete. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. My contribution, he finally said. He was looking at me now the way a man looks at a road he has driven 100 times that has suddenly revealed a cliff he never noticed. $300,000, Gerald said pleasantly. Donated last spring. It funded the new electrophysiology lab on the 3rd floor where you operate, I believe, Marcus. He paused. Is everything all right? You look a little pale. Perhaps you should sit down. Marcus did not sit down. He stood very still while around him the room began, slowly, to return to its own conversations, though not entirely, and not quickly. People moved away from him in the particular way people move away from someone who has just done something they cannot take back. Gerald led me to our table and we had a very pleasant dinner. He asked about my business. My daughters, I have two, Claire and her younger sister Beth, and my granddaughters, whom I had photographs of on my phone and showed him without being asked. He was a grandfather himself. We talked for a long time. Marcus left the gala early. I saw him go. 3 days later, I drove back to Claire's house. This time I called ahead, and she was expecting me. I had spoken with Patricia the night before. Everything was in order. I sat with Claire at the kitchen table. The same table where 2 chairs still sat on stacks of magazines, and I put Ray's report down in front of her. I had organized it with Patricia's help into something a person could move through without being completely destroyed by it. The facts first. The financial picture. The timeline. The other things last, with as much care as I could manage. Claire read for a long time. I made coffee and kept it hot, and didn't say anything she didn't ask me to respond to. When she finally looked up, her face was very still. Not the stillness of shock. She had suspected some of this, I think, for longer than she had admitted to herself. It was the stillness of a woman whose worst fear has been confirmed, and who is, in some terrible way, also relieved to no longer be afraid of it. "What do I do now?" she said. "Whatever you decide to do," I said. "But I want you to know that whatever it is, you are not doing it alone, and you are not doing it without resources." I had already spoken with Patricia about the divorce proceedings. Given the financial documentation, the concealed assets, the evidence of funds diverted from the household, Claire's attorney, one Patricia had recommended, a specialist in family law, would have a strong case. Maine is an equitable distribution state. The documentation Ray had gathered would matter significantly. I also told Claire that I had set up a separate account in her name at a bank Marcus had no relationship with. I had put enough in it that she and the girls could live without pressure for 2 years, while the proceedings moved forward. It was not charity. It was her inheritance, early, and she could do with it whatever she chose. She cried again, differently than the first time. The divorce took 8 months. Marcus contested several elements, as Patricia had predicted he would. His attorney was skilled. Patricia's recommendation was better. In the end, Claire received the house, primary custody of Lily and Rose, and a settlement that Patricia described, with characteristic understatement, as appropriate. Marcus kept his job at Hargrove Memorial, though Gerald later told me, in a brief note, that certain things had been noted and certain conversations had been had. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Claire went back to work full-time the following spring. She took a position at a clinic 20 minutes from the house, better hours, and the kind of work she had always been best at, which was knowing her patients by name and taking time with them. Within a year, she had been offered a lead role in their chronic care program. Lily got new shoes. Rose got a sweater that fit. They got a kitchen table with 4 working chairs and a backyard playhouse I built for them over a long weekend in June. Nothing fancy, just solid wood, properly joined, the way I was taught. The last time I sat in that backyard, Lily climbed onto my lap and asked me if I was going to come visit every weekend forever. I told her I would come as often as she wanted. She said she wanted every weekend. I told her that sounded about right to me. There is something I have thought about many times since all of this happened. Something one of Claire's friends said to her during the divorce, which Claire repeated to me later. The friend had said she couldn't believe Marcus had been so careless, that a man in his position, married to a woman like Claire, with a career like his, how could he have thrown it all away so carelessly? Claire had said she didn't think it was carelessness. She thought Marcus had simply never believed there would be consequences, because there had never been anyone in his life who had made the effort to create them. I thought about that for a while. I am not a man who believes in revenge as a goal. I have known men who organized their lives around settling scores, and they were, without exception, unhappy men. What I did for Claire and for Lily and Rose. I did it because my daughter had spent 8 years becoming smaller, and because her daughters were wearing taped shoes in a house with a $400,000 income, and because someone needed to do something and I happened to be in a position to do it. But I will not pretend there was nothing satisfying about the moment in that ballroom when Gerald Whitfield shook my hand and Marcus Hale finally understood, for the first time in 8 years, who he had actually been dealing with. I drove home from Claire's house on a Sunday evening in late autumn, the highway empty, the trees bare, the sky that particular shade of dark blue that comes just before full dark in Maine. I had a thermos of coffee on the seat beside me and an 8-hour drive ahead of me, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, completely at ease. Some things take time to do correctly. That has always been true of the work I know: best timber, contracts, buildings meant to last. You do not rush the foundation. You do not skip the steps that no one sees. You take the time, you do the work properly, and what you build stands. That is all I did. My daughter is standing now. My granddaughters are standing. That is enough for me. That is more than enough. If you are listening to this, and you have someone in your life who is becoming smaller, who is being made to doubt themselves by someone who should be lifting them up, I want you to know that it is never too late to show up. It is never too late to be the person who refuses to look away. You do not have to have $300,000 or a connection to a hospital board. You just have to show up, tell the truth, and refuse to let the people you love face it alone. That is what fathers are for. That is what family is for. Thank you for listening.